everyone for joining us for Harnessing Smart Building Controls for Energy Efficiency and Sustainability. We are doing this webinar because without really transformative change in the buildings where we live and work, we're going to lose the climate battle in the Pacific Northwest. And we have a unique ability here in this group to connect and convene decision makers who can influence the corporate culture and help create policies that are going to help solve the climate crisis and take on projects that are going to help us move forward. I also want to take a second to thank our Seattle sponsors. We've got some really great folks who have committed to helping us do this work and putting on education events like this. Without them, none of this would be possible. Since this is a joint Seattle and Bellevue 2030 district event, I also want to call out our sponsors in Bellevue who have taken the lead on helping us create a more robust program on the other side of Lake Washington. So for those of you that don't know, the 2030 district was born out of Architecture 2030's targets of a 50% reduction in energy, water, and transportation emissions by the year 2030. We now have 24 districts across North America, the most recent of which was Bellevue, and we represent about 580 million square feet of commercial, multifamily, municipal, and other types of real estate. Just to let you know, we have some great upcoming events that we hope to see you at. On June 26th at 4 p.m., we're going to be doing our Bellevue Summer Social at the Spring District Park in Bellevue. This will just be a fun opportunity to get together with other folks that are interested in sustainability. And I think Riley is throwing the registration link in the chat. So we hope to see you there. We think it should be a really great time. So without any further ado, I'd like to introduce you to today's panelists. We have Dan Crosby with Legend Energy Advisors, Gary Milligan with Schneider Electric, and Craig Engelbrecht with Long Building Technologies. We really appreciate having them all here. We think that this is going to be a very great discussion about building controls and how they can be used to hit our energy efficiency and decarbonization targets. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Dan Crosby with Legend Energy Advisors to talk about emerging technologies in building control and automation systems. Dan?
Appreciate it, Daniel. So Dan Crosby with Legend Energy Advisors. We kind of have three parts of our business. So really, we started out focusing in commodity risk for power and gas markets, both in traditional power and gas as well as renewables. And one of the things we quickly saw was customers need to understand how they're using energy if they're going to manage it in markets better, both from a financial responsibility as well as a sustainability perspective. And so we've built a platform from the ground up to really help customers understand how they're using energy and how to interact with markets better. And then in between that, we have an infrastructure service for a lot of the electrification that's going on. There's actually a lot we're doing in the data center space, which I'm sure everybody's kind of aware of right now. It's just a completely insane increase in power consumption and really the power density in ways that we've just never seen from any industry other than maybe steel and aluminum in days past. And so part of that journey was really helping office buildings as well as industrial environments understand how they're using energy in real time and how to do that better in ways they can get better. And kind of the cool part of being able to see a lot of the automation that's gone on in the industrial environment is we've been able to bring some of that into the office and built environment. And so there's a whole lot of technology that's transforming. BMS systems obviously have come a long way in the last number of years, and kind of integrating with that in a whole bunch of different ways has been a big shift in the industry. And so one of the things that we've been doing, especially in really large office buildings that are 1 million square feet, 2 million square feet, is being able to give tenants all the way down to their specific tenant space a real-time energy intensity as well as environmental intensity every 5 minutes. And one of the really cool things that we've seen both in the office environment as well as the industrial environment is when you actually start giving the occupants or people on a factory floor in an industrial environment real-time data of how their actions in those moments are impacting the overall energy consumption of that space as well as the environmental impact, people take action. They take ownership. They feel like they actually can do something about it. And they're not just getting a monthly, and a lot of times they're not even getting monthly. Usually it's just an annual number of here's how we did last year, and you're finding out in June. So to be able to see, how Tuesday was different from Thursday this week, and especially in some of our office environments where there's still a very significant amount of people working from home, especially on Mondays and Fridays, being able to make sure that the office floor in their specific tenant space is really responding in a way that it should at those occupancy levels has been a huge opportunity to help buildings overall reduce consumption. And then for a lot of these, Fortune 500, especially tenants that are trying to track all of their sustainability metrics globally, and they're not having to derive that from, either master meters of the whole building or master meters of entire floors that they only have pieces of and backing into that calculation. But having real-time data makes one, people taking action, but then all that reporting is totally automated. And so that significantly lowers the lift there. And then beyond that is moving into kind of the deeper building systems of being able to do, LED retrofits are something that most buildings have completely implemented now. But one of the most interesting things I think that we've seen, we had a 2.2 million square foot building that was built in 1960. And in the last 9 years, it's been completely gutted and remodeled. And to watch literally an exponential drop in energy intensity on the tenant floors compared to base building systems, where we've seen like on peak 70% energy reduction. And it's really coming from several things. One, new lighting, two, lighting controls, and then three, a tremendous amount of the computing power that used to be on an office, floor is now moved to the cloud. So a lot of that power consumption is gone. And then the overall efficiency of supplemental air conditioners or crack units or other things that are there on the floor, being able to make sure that those are functioning the way they should and off when their occupancy is low or significantly turned down, to match that has been a huge area of energy reduction all the way down to the tenant space where they have the ability to control things. And then there's some new technology that we've been exploring recently, kind of related to base buildings, where even things like the wastewater through the building can actually be harnessed through heat pump cycles and some emerging technology there where you're capturing energy. And that's, really where we're trying to help customers understand all of the places where energy is being lost or wasted, whether that's condensing steam out of district steam systems, that a lot of times that goes into a huge vat to just sit there and cool off before it's cool enough to just dump it down the drain. And that's a tremendous amount of energy that's being wasted that could be put through some of the new technology with Rankine cycles to be able to harvest that energy and either turn it into electricity or turn it into some other form of heat, like heating domestic water and some of these other opportunities that can significantly reduce the overall carbon footprint and energy intensity of the building, because you're not wasting a lot of energy that you were traditionally dumping. And the nice thing is, and especially in many of the cities that are participating in the 2030 district, there's a significant amount of rebate money and other incentives out there. We had a $750,000 VFD project for a customer that, over $600,000 of it was covered by rebates. So when you're implementing demand response programs and actively interacting with markets, that can actually, the payback on that project was like 4 months because of the revenue that they were able to capture, because of additional control they had. And being able, because of the way a fan curve works, you can reduce a significant amount of energy with almost zero impact that can be felt by the tenants. And so the cool part of that is all of these pieces are coming together right now through automation and through emerging technology that's giving it just an unprecedented level of transparency, not just to the building operator and the BMS system, but actually putting a significant amount of power real time every 5 minutes into tenants' hands, which have a significant impact on the overall energy spend, as well as energy intensity, as well as environmental footprint of the building. And that's one of the areas that we're seeing the greatest area of impact is really giving power to the tenants, which are having a huge impact also on the base building systems. So I'll throw it back to you, Daniel. I don't know if we're new questions at the end.
Yeah, thank you so much for those insights, Dan. And if questions do arise during the presentation, please feel free to put them in the chat so that they're not lost. And then we'll also have time for a Q&A at the end of the hour. With that, I would like to now turn it over to Gary Milligan with Schneider Electric, who is going to be talking about carbon reductions and sustainability. And Gary, you have control.
Yeah, Gary Milligan with Schneider Electric in the Pacific Northwest. And I just have a couple of slides. I'm going to talk at a very high level. I have a simple message when it comes to harnessing building controls. And I want to spend a little bit of time talking about Schneider because I think people, in many cases, really don't understand Schneider in its full capacity. And it's doing a lot of cool stuff, but it's not the only company doing cool stuff. And I'm not here to imply that it is. As we just heard, there's some amazing technologies going on from folks like Legend. And so we're here to kind of like, I just want to kind of give a little overview of Schneider and talk about the way I feel that building controls can be harnessed better. So Schneider's a global company. It's 150,000 employees in over 100 countries around the world. It's based in Europe. And I think one of the unique things about Schneider is that it doesn't have a massive headquarters within regional offices. It's pretty much innovation and R&D hubs around the world, places like Sydney and Berlin and Paris, and then in the U.S., Andover, Massachusetts, St. Louis, Nashville, Tennessee, and also employs thousands of U.S. workers in manufacturing. So it's a major manufacturing and technology company. And really, its business is broken down to kind of like three main areas. First is energy and power management. And it does it from both the manufacturing side and the software side. So it makes the electrical components that comprise your basic electric panel and the electric components in a building, and then the software to manage them. So it's energy and power management. The second one is automation. So in automation, that's both from a like building controls perspective as well as smart factories. And again, builds the parts. Many of the parts and components are built by Schneider, also makes the software to manage it. And then the last one is electrification. And electrification is a huge business for Schneider Electric globally. And Schneider is actively participating in the shift from just basic electricity to clean electricity. So if electricity is produced by fossil fuel, from fossil fuel sources, it's not considered clean energy. So Schneider is a big part of that shift that's going on globally. You can see here, this is the Schneider technology platform. It's called EcoStruxure. And this is a massive sort of a plug and play software layer. It's got basically 4 end markets. So there's buildings, data center, industry, and grid, and 6 domains of expertise, which again are buildings, power, IT, machine, and plant, and I can't see the last one down there, grid, right? Yeah, I'm trying to read this slide, but the point is that there's a lot of things you can plug into this EcoStruxure platform, and it's not that different in many ways from other platforms that are out there. Schneider didn't invent this. But the thing to point out here is up this top layer, apps, analytics, and services, that's where your really smart building controls come into play. And that's analytics layers, including the type of one that we just heard about from Legend. And that sits on top of what we call edge control in Schneider, or that's sort of the layer that the controllers actually sit at. So these are the controllers that run the chillers, the boilers, the air handling units, VAV boxes. So when I say edge control, we're talking about the actual basic building control system at the level of monitoring and control. And then at the bottom layer, you see connected products. Those would be the sensors. Those would be the sensors both on the wall, in ductwork. They might be third-party devices like meters, anything that is connected to the edge layer above it, and then potentially connected also to the apps, analytics, and services layer above that. And so this is our basic technology platform, and you can plug so many different things into it that this is part of what Schneider is doing towards decarbonization. So now I'm going to shift to the next slide. Is that here? Yeah, so this is sort of what I came here to talk about today of harnessing BAS, or building automation systems, that to go from energy efficiency towards decarbonization. And if you look along the top, I've broken it down into 4 steps. Okay, first is knowing what you have. The second is the modernization pathway. The third is maintenance, and the last one is decarbonization. So under knowing what you have, when you go from 1 to 4, these days, that's really a paradigm shift for most people, that they're not really used to thinking in terms of how can we decarbonize our building? How can we decarbonize our systems, our processes? They're pretty much thinking about how do we get the building running well, keep it running well, and not spend too much to make that happen. So what's important here is in my mind, I see the steps of getting onto the modernization pathway is really important. So in other words, under knowing what you have, you've got network controller. Here's your building automation system: network controllers, a workstation, unitary controllers, and sensors. And so if you want to know the age, you want to know basically how the system works, be sort of comfortable with it, have a partner that you work with that you're comfortable working with, and then you want to have that system on some type of modernization pathway. There are buildings in this area that have 25, 35-year-old building automation systems. And what many times companies are trying to do is actually maintain those systems, and they don't have them on some type of modernization pathway. So part of my message today is figure out how and where your system needs modernization and just get that process going. And under the modernization pathway column, you see network and software and primary equipment controllers. That's where you can start. You can start from the top down. So if you have a Schneider system or a Johnson system or a Honeywell system, typically you don't have to modernize the whole thing at once. You can modernize it from the head end down. But the point is you want to have some process in place to budget and create a pathway to modernize that system. And if it's fully modernized now, then that's a pretty easy step. And then after that comes maintenance. So what I see, again, people doing is they're maintaining a system that they don't have a plan to modernize. And they keep running into the same problems over and over again of, well, to maintain it, you need to replace controllers or replace a communication trunk or replace the whole front end. And if you have a modernization pathway in place, that will make your maintenance that much easier. And then the last step is decarbonize. And in that now you're using the building automation system as a platform to plug in other things. So you could perhaps run power management from that same platform. You could maybe connect with a microgrid, engage with battery storage, EV charging, meters, and literally run the entire technology for decarbonization from one platform with the goal of net zero carbon. So again, this is the process. And my simple message today is put modernization pathway ahead of maintenance and get that pathway in place and figure it out and just start the process of keeping that system up to date, because we see systems running on Windows XP. Well, a building running on Windows XP is going to be tough to maintain. So I guess that's my message for today. And uh, uh, yeah, that's what I came here to say, basically.
Thanks so much, Barry. And yeah, and I think this decarbonization piece is particularly important now for our folks in Seattle who are looking at compliance with the building emissions performance standard as that comes online towards the end of the decade. Thinking about how we can utilize building controls to start to meet those targets along with the statewide energy efficiency targets that we are required to achieve for buildings of a certain size. I think building controls is a big piece of that solution. So really appreciate having Schneider Electric here talking about sort of those pathways and how we can start to move towards some of those targets. Now, I would like to introduce our next speaker, Craig Engelbrecht with Long Building Technologies, here to share some case studies in energy efficiency and to tell us a little bit more about how Long is approaching some of this. And Craig, take it away.
Welcome, everyone. Happy Wednesday. It is a beautiful day outside in Seattle today. So if anything, that's what we got to rejoice about because it's been a long time coming, hasn't it? Hey, welcome. Thank you for joining us today. Really excited to talk to you about a couple things here. And the first, I just want you to be able to know who Long is. Long is a smart buildings integrator, master systems integrator with really two key technologies within the building, HVAC controls, which also includes lighting control and security solutions. We have two offices here locally, Renton and Silverdale, but we're based out of Denver, cover 7 states, a little over 500 employees, so and do work all over the country. So locally, though, we all are, I hope, aware that the Clean Building Act or the Performance Standard is well underway. And so a couple things I just want everybody to know is there's 2 tier of buildings. Tier 1 is greater than 50,000 square feet. 2 is 20,000 to 50,000 square feet. And really the key things that you need to understand is what is it that you have to do and when do you got to do it by, right? So if you look here, tier 1 covered buildings, what's the requirement? Well, you got to benchmark. You got to know where you're at. And then you got to build a operations and maintenance program and an energy management plan. Now, what do you have to do with that? They're looking for specifically your EIU target and for you to work on getting to that target. How you do it can be multiple variety of ways, and that's what we're going to talk about next. But be able to start going down that path of getting yourself to that target. Now, compliance deadlines. This is the key. Tier 1 buildings, more than 220,000 square feet, June 1st, 2026. That seems like a long ways away, but it is not a long ways away. So please start the process to go down that path. And there are resources to help with that, including ones on this call. Talk to the district. They can help point you to resources. You can go online to the Clean Building Performance Standard website. Just Google it and you can get a lot of information. There's a lot of service providers. The service providers you work with today probably will help you. So June 1st, 2027, more than 90,000 square feet and less than 220. And then 2028 is 50,000 to 90. So those are key dates that you need to be thinking about to be working towards. So what do you do? That's a really good question. And we have one of our customers come to us and say, hey, this is what we want to do. Let's talk it through. We worked out a plan to help support them. And it was a school district, around 30 buildings. It was a 2-year process from the time they started the conversation to today. And so that's why I'm telling you, 2 years between now and when the end of the time of compliance starts, you want to start working on it right now. So step one, they benchmarked their data. They gathered enough energy data for each of the buildings for the trailing 2 years. Step two, they hired a commissioning agent that was independent of anyone, controls contractor, the district, but they hired a commissioning agent. He worked very closely with their energy manager on site. And they went through and reviewed each building in detail. And they identified various deficiencies in their existing HVAC system and the control system, some mechanical, some electronic. Step three, the maintenance and controls contractor, or the maintenance team from the district and the controls contractor, in this case, us and other controls contractor, we reviewed it. And then we put a plan together of how to go through and correct some of that. We implemented over about a year period, low cost or even no cost, just some simple tweaking, modifications, a lot of low cost stuff that wasn't very expensive. Some CapEx money was spent that was used to help correct some of those deficiencies. And the beautiful thing is, compared to the 2020 and 2021 baseline years, their projected energy usage, electric usage, is 20% less district-wide. 2024 gas usage, 33%. They're projecting over $1 million or right around $1 million of energy savings with less than an 18-month ROI. And so again, the compliance does not have to be overly burdensome of spending a lot of CapEx. You can start simple. The next phase for them, though, is to go deeper. Where else can they go? So now they've stacked up some CapEx projects that they want to work on, and they've teed up to start using a monitoring-based commissioning software to be able to start to continuously look at that system and be able to find issues that come up that aren't seen through graphics or trending or whatnot. So it's a really exciting for this customer. And this is not the only customer. There's a lot of them out there. So when you're looking at the Clean Building Performance Standard, when you look at what is required, don't feel overwhelmed. First thing, just look at where your energy's at, figure out your benchmark. Second thing, just get some help. And you can get some simple help. You don't need a big contract and expensive contract to go in and start finding issues. And then just work with your providers, whether it's your current provider or providers like us. You will see the results. So what I also want to do is just share some other things that can be done. So technologies are changing rapidly. And I'm going to talk very briefly about security. And you're going to say, well, what does security system have anything to do with energy or sustainability? Well, it traditionally hasn't. But with technology and how it's changing, now you can have your credentials on your phone, your mobile credentials. You can get into the office without even taking your phone out of your pocket. And it reduces physical cards and reduces duplication and has other benefits, right? But what's the one thing security system has that an HVAC control system doesn't have? It has the personal information or preference of information around a person. So you have all the people there. Now you can store data like, where does this person sit? What do they like the temperature to be? What light level should it be at? What shade level? Shades up, down? What do they like? Sound masking volume level. Do they like it a little louder, a little less? You can store all that preference data in a security system. And then now you can push that data. I'll show you that in a second. into an HVAC control system to be able to help drive things like outside air levels, right? How much outside air do you need? How many occupants do I have? And so you can now start to use technologies and the integration of those technologies to make all that work. So an example here, and we have this working. This is not pie in the sky. If you come to our office in Renton, Washington, you can see all of this in real time. Literally, you walk up, you wave your hand, it says, hey, someone's here, looks for my phone, finds my phone, credentializes, opens a door, and also says, hey, HVAC system, go prep Craig's space. He sits here, he likes this light level, he likes this temperature, and so on. And so now I can send all that information over through the integration and be able to prep that space to tell it to start to do things. I also have cameras that can also track how many occupants are coming and going and where they're at as well, that also have privacy around it. Now, once I walk into my room, it's still unoccupied because it doesn't know if I've actually entered my room. Once I actually open my office, then all of a sudden the sensors say, hey, Craig's here, and it starts to set all the modes of what you want. And you can even have more advanced things like, hey, because of the weather, I want to do this with my blinds and my lights and whatnot. It's too bright. There's glare off of the windshields of the cars, so make sure it does this when it's at that. And then what's really cool is not a lot of people realize this, but with LED lighting control, you can get LEDs programmed and the drivers for those to dim to off, meaning you can actually send it a 0 to 10 volt signal from your control system and it'll actually turn off. So what we did in our office, we eliminated every single light switch. We put in our thermostat that also has the ability to set light levels and whatnot. And all of our HVAC controls manages our lighting control. And so it's really great. I can actually do that also from my phone. And so it not only increases your security, but it also increases your occupant experience. And then it can help drive the energy savings. It can help drive how much fresh air you need to drive into that space without having to overdrive energy use. And, you know, one thing we're seeing more of, especially for wide open spaces, you can use cameras to now start to see occupancy data. And so we've got it in our office where we've blacked out spots so you can't see privacy when you look at it, but the camera can still count how many people are in that open space. And so you can't really get that with an aux sensor, but you can with a camera. And so now you can get people counting and to be able to understand how many people are in that space, how much ventilation do I need? And so there's other software, other technologies that does some other things that all synergize with this. And so what's really great is today, that is all available. So having said that, any questions? Does anybody have any questions? And I'll hand it back over to Daniel.
Great. Thank you so much, Craig. We really appreciate it. And some of that stuff is very much bordering on the Star Trek-y kind of side in terms of the technology and everything. I'll also just add, there was another 2030 district member who I think was also I mean, not to put you on the spot, Craig, but I think was also another Long Building Technologies client who was able to achieve compliance with that Washington State Clean Buildings Law almost exclusively through correct building benchmarking and building controls upgrades. And the ROI ended up being less than 12 months. So not to say that that should be your expectation of Craig and what his team can do, but as a standard rule, but there are some really great success stories out there of people who've been able to get into compliance and take advantage of the early adopter incentive program. And now to talk a little bit more about incentives and other options for helping to actually get these building controls upgraded within your building, I'm going to turn it over now to our friend Armando from Seattle City Light. Armando, would you mind introducing yourself and sharing a little bit about what Seattle City Light has to offer?
Definitely, Daniel, and thank you very much. My name, as you mentioned, is Armando Verdiel. I am with Seattle City Lights Program Delivery Group. I am its Energy Program Delivery Manager. We work directly with building owners, reps, contractors, other implementers to develop projects. And if we save energy, we'll pay an incentive. Uh, in the slides that I'll show, it's going to be a good amount of content, but I'll briefly breeze through it as these slides are going to be shared. Please leverage them as resources. And the last slide is my most important one. If you want to reach out to us, you have any projects that you're considering or about to develop, please call our energy advisors and they will direct you to our best energy management analyst to help develop your project. Whether you are looking to implement controls to improve your operations, improve comfort, productivity in your space, or as we just saw, to meet the building performance standards from the city or state, City Light's happy to help you. We have a few controls incentives, and note we have many, many more, but I'll briefly just go over a couple of control and building performance incentives that can help you. As you saw earlier, when should you reach out to City Light if you have a potential project? As early as possible. We saw that the larger buildings have up to 2026 in June to report for the building performance standards. That is in capital improvement world tomorrow. First incentive I wanted to call out, City Light has what we call a major HVAC controls upgrade incentive. It is extremely similar if you've ever worked with the Puget Sound energy incentive, simplified way. But in essence, if you're installing new controls equipment with a visual interface and a web interface, we'd like to work with you on this incentive program. We'd ask also, as well as installing controls, did you implement 3 sequences? And sequences can be anything along the lines of scheduling, ventilation control, lockouts, resets, demand controls, among other things. We have 2 payment periods for this incentive program. The first one, after new controls have been installed and implemented. Then we'll do another payment after a 12-month performance period. There are typical savings of about 10 to 15%, and we pay 23 cents a kilowatt hour for those energy savings. So big controls measure that we have here. It's being used more and more these days as they are solid ways to reduce energy usage in a building as well as the operations. Up next, we have this is one of 2 whole building programs that we have. Most of you may be familiar for a pay-for-performance model where we have 2 routes to go, a 3-year route or a 5-year route, where we engage with you for that period of time, and we'll do and encourage a mix of capital improvement projects, operation and maintenance savings projects, installing equipment that we discount at manufacturers, and with all of that, with all of the combination of potential opportunities and projects that we can work on together, we'll measure energy savings at the meter. CIP, O&M, all those savings that we'll measure at the meter. If we have a 3-year engagement, we'll pay 8 cents a kilowatt hour for any savings that we have from behavioral or capital improvement projects. And if we have a 5-year engagement, we pay based on the slider. The more energy you save, the more money we'd pay, up to 34 cents a kilowatt hour for saving about I want to say 50% of energy in your space from the baseline. And we do make payments every year for this program. We also have an existing building commissioning program that has 2 routes. One is more typical manual retro commissioning, hiring someone to assess the existing operations of controls, make recommendations, make changes, and review the energy savings from those. The other route is to go through a fault-based detection software approach, where the software will tell you what are the opportunities, we'll implement them, measure the savings. This program has 3 payment periods. At the inception, when we assess the energy uses of the building and the control, we'll pay an incentive. It's typically around $4,000. After the commissioning changes have been implemented, we'll make another payment as well. And lastly, after a year to a year and a half of performance evaluations, we'll make a last payment on this program. Wanted to call out, City Light has also 2 what we call supplemental incentives. The first one is called the Project Development Incentive, or known more colloquially as a contractor SPIF. We recognize that working with utilities does take some administrative work and overhead on rebate management. We want to pay 2.5 cents per kilowatt hour on the project on top of the base incentive of whatever program we're working on. To say thank you for engaging with us to work on the incentive program and partnering with us essentially to help create this clean energy future in our fair city. The other supplemental incentive that we have is one that the Bonneville Power Administration has established, and we administer it. We would work together on designating an individual, whether it be part of an organization, part of the company that's owning the building, part of the contractor, a third-party commissioner, someone that is a project manager for energy projects. Then we'll work with that individual to develop a comprehensive plan. If over 2 years you can have various projects to save over 200,000 kilowatt hours or above. So we have that designated person. We'll have that plan to save that energy over 2 years. And if those are met, and we'll take on some risk, we'll pay another 2.5 cents kilowatt hour savings for each individual project, just to ensure that we can have that relationship. And this can be for a large building or a portfolio of buildings, depending on how your properties are developed and categorized. Thinking, oh yeah, one thing I'll mention here is beyond all the projects that can be done, it needs to be a mix of lighting, non-lighting controls, so on and so forth. And the important part is if we develop a great plan together, we'll have a good amount of projects to work on. Again, most important slides, if you're considering projects, whether it be to improve your operations, your comfort, or to meet performance standards, meet requirements, work with us. The slides will be sent out at the end, but we'll have a link to a form that can engage your energy advisors. You'll have the email, the phone, and then these are live humans. It's not a chatbot, it's not AI. We do want to work with you. We want to understand what your needs are, what your goals are, and the more that we can improve your experience in working with us, the better. And I think that is it for me, Daniel.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Armando. And thank you to Seattle City Light for making so many incredible incentives available to us. I think this goes a long way towards helping us out. So at this point, we'd love to open it up to questions from our attendees. If you have any questions, feel free to either raise your hand or unmute yourself and just throw out a question. And if you are the type that prefers to put them in the chat, also feel free to put them in the chat. Just to get us started, I have a question for Gary with Schneider Electric, which is when it comes to energy storage solutions, I'm curious in what ways smart building controls can integrate with things like rooftop solar to manage the building's energy use more efficiently and to ensure that there's reliable power supply during peak demand periods. I'm just kind of curious if you can speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, I think, and I'm glad you brought that up because it is something where your buildings are becoming actually part of the grid. They're becoming more and more interactive, so they're not the passive recipient of power from a distant source, but they are in fact increasingly becoming places where energy is stored, where it's created. and where they're interacting with the local utility in a demand response type of situation. So I think in that case, I mean, it gets tricky, and it's important to make sure that you're, I alluded to having your system up to date and modern. And that doesn't mean it has to be state of the art, the latest version of everything, but it has to be in a reasonably modern state in terms of the operating system and in terms of the platform that you're using has to be open enough to accept those types of things. And then it's pulling in. You're going to need partners. You're going to need different players involved to help you through all that. There's also a movement towards energy as a service where a provider, whether it's Schneider or somebody else, comes in and builds the infrastructure, and then essentially they own it, they manage it, and you get the benefit of the energy from that. So it is a growing movement, and I think it's just a matter of having the right consultants and the right people who know what they're doing on your team, because it is now taking a building out into the realm of, we're not just a standalone building anymore.
Great. Thank you so much, Gary. And again, yeah, feel free to throw any questions that you may have into the chat. For Craig, I was curious, if there have been any, and this could be maybe for either Legend or Long, what are the latest advancements in real-time energy monitoring technologies, and how can our property owners be using those to identify and address inefficiencies in building operations? What have you seen as like the newest technology, the thing that you're most excited about?
Yeah, the age old, you just got to get information is the first step. But the latest technologies really are, not even the latest. It's just now being applied the best way. And it's just controls and having good controls, working with getting rebates on those. And then it's really looking at how to implement analytics and fault detection where you can actually have a process to use that data and make changes as you go. There's definitely some newer technologies around optimization for supply air temperature resets and static pressure resets and things that optimize rooftop units and air handling units. And those are out there. But when you really break it down today, the best stuff is some of the stuff that's been around, but we just haven't really put focus around it. And so that's what was really just get back to the fundamentals. The third part, though, is integration. There's so many IoT sensors and devices that are out there that now can talk that they weren't able to talk to before. There's a lot of IT integrations. So you can have an API talk to an API and a cloud system talk to a local system. And so having a service provider that can help do that, and make disruptive technologies. They make these little sensors that you can put anywhere for leak detection to, put for temperature and freezers to see if that goes down, right? There's so many different sensors that are like that can be bridged into a control system and give you better information that drives your energy savings.
Dan, is there a particular technology that's really getting you all excited at Legend?
Yeah, I think you're kind of going back to reiterating the same thing. You can't, manage what you can't measure. And if you get too many systems that aren't integrated with each other, then they're not really, providing you the data. And that's, I think, where the integration piece comes in. So getting all of those things talking to each other and then how that really interacts with the market. And, effectively when you're interacting with the market, you're interacting with the grid. And, to me, that is the energy transition, right? Until you're managing, electricity is the most inelastic commodity on earth. And so until you're interacting with the the grid and the market in real time, you're not doing anything effectively. You're just looking at things in retrospect, and oftentimes you can't even understand what's going on just because of the lack of granularity that you have. So, I think that's where we're most excited is customers that are in real time actively doing two things at once. One is macro long-term overall energy reduction. And then two is actively in real time, which is, sub 1 hour, interacting with the grid. And in markets where you can interact with the market, we're interacting with that as well.
Great. Thanks, Dan. And again, if there's folks who have any questions, feel free to throw them in the chat. This next one is actually a question for our friends from Seattle City Light. So Armando, I don't know if you are able to give us any kind of hint or inkling as to when or if we might have a demand response program coming through Seattle City Light. Puget Sound Energy's recently just developed their own demand response program, actually through a subsidiary of Schneider Electric's. And we're pretty excited about it on the east side. And we're just kind of curious if that's on the horizon for Seattle City Light.
That is certainly on the horizon, Daniel. I'll give a preamble of three programs that are relevant to what our fellow panelists are discussing, the technologies, controls. And I believe we are going to launch a demand response, although we're calling it flexible load portfolio segment, where we will be developing demand response programs and similar load shifting or peak saving programs. We recently, I believe, closed the position to hire that portfolio manager. Don't have an exact timeline, but wouldn't be surprised if it's sometime in the first half of next year. Similarly, we have released an internal distributed energy resources strategy and are developing an external facing distributed energy resources strategy. We'll develop another portfolio segment. I believe it was Gary who was discussing integrating renewables, and all of them talked about that interchange between buildings and grid. We will be developing programs, be it generation, storage, transmission. Distributing to the grid, getting back from the grid. City Light is also starting to implement a time of use program, where obviously we'll incentivize properties to use power when not everyone is using power off of peak times, and a lot of exciting things coming next year. The last one I'll call out is, I believe, Q1. At some point in Q1 next year, we will also launch a strategic energy management program for both commercial properties and multifamily properties, where we'll do a 12-month engagement with cohorts, specifically to help and support these participants in the cohorts to meet these city and state performance standards. So a lot of demand response portfolio segment coming along, distributed energy resource portfolio segment, and strategic energy management program to help support meeting city and state performance standards. Looking to help our territory meet their energy goals and energy opportunities. Engage with us.
We are very excited to have those programs coming online, and excited to see, the building controls save you so much money, but once they're paired with a demand response program, you can also start to actually generate income out of, time of use shifts and things like that related to, how you're using your building controls. So as much as it's an investment that will save you money on energy that you're paying for, you're also getting paid back for the energy that you're saving through these incentives and through the demand response program. And if anyone has a building that is getting their energy from Puget Sound Energy, I highly encourage you to look into the demand response program over there, or you can always reach out to Gary and folks at Schneider Electric if you want to learn more. They'll put you in touch with the right people. I'm going to ask all of our speakers today to throw their emails in the chat here. And I think, unless anyone has another question, I think we can wrap things up. But they're going to put their emails in the chat, and we're also going to send out a after event email to everyone with the slides and a link to the video recording. Feel free to share as you like. We really appreciate everyone coming today. I hope you will join me in thanking our speakers today for joining us and for helping to actually implement the projects that are really going to move our region in a positive direction when it comes to energy efficiency and building decarbonization. So thank you to all of our speakers, and thank you to all of you for joining us. Please get in touch with each other. That's the way these projects get done, and we hope to see you at the next 2030 District Education event.